Chapter 9 takes up temporal cycles and the psychology of time. And it's super rich, I think, especially overlaid on top of Chapter 8. So in Chapter 8, we talk about different groups, and we talk about, complementarity of roles and factions and competition. Well, all of that plays out over time. And so in this chapter, we introduce the idea of social cycles and the idea of social pendulum swings between, for example, left and right, or boom and bust of an economic system. And we talk about that from multiple perspectives. So some of it is just summarizing the idea of it, and some of it is talking about the different parameters that we could adopt as researchers, the different properties of social change that we could look at if we imagine cyclical patterns. So there are three kind of ones that jump off the page to me. One of them is that in a pendulum swing, for example, from left to right, there are a couple of differences from what you might think of as linear change. So one of them is, if you imagine the pendulum swinging, just at the time when it has moved to its furthest point away from the center is the time when the momentum actually stops. So all the while that it's moving to the side, it's slowing because of the inertia caused by gravity. And so we talk in the book about the idea of latent change and how it can look as the pendulum swings to the extreme as though we're seeing this kind of monumental change, and we are. But what's also happening is that there are unseen forces that are slowing that and that are stopping it, and we're about to have a reversal. And the point of the reversal is a nonlinear change that I think we're all so interested in social change scholarship, and we really would like to be able to predict that. Another aspect of this is that when the pendulum is swinging to the center, right, it looks like there's no change happening at the center, but in fact, that is the point of maximum speed in a physical pendulum when it's about to accelerate off in the other direction. So I think this idea of latent change and looking at patterns of momentum versus decreasing acceleration or slowing is really important in social psychology, and that actually is really important in engaging the scholarship of social change. It's these latent forces that are not visible that we need to get better at identifying. And I really like that aspect of it. There's a few other things that we talk about in the book, like the troubled concepts of narrative and history, and how we represent our past in our head and our future in our head, which is a theme that we also take up in the next two chapters. Maybe I'll stop there. What did you think of it, Chiara?
Yeah, I really enjoyed this idea because it kind of, time provides so much context for what we see, and that allows us to look back at it. When we just look at the current moment, I think we miss so much of the picture that's factoring people's kind of decision makings and stuff. And I think that's really important when you consider things like what's salient to people. So, I think there have been a lot of narratives around people are feeling threat from like economic insecurity and that sort of thing. So what becomes salient is perhaps thinking of a time where they perceive that economic insecurity was less. And then there's a lot of values that may come along with that. So I think it's really valuable to kind of consider how time focuses in on what is salient to different groups of people, what's salient to different individuals, and how that plays on each other, and then how that kind of intersects with the threat, which we also talk about in this chapter, which is like, what are the perceived threats to the group or the individual, and how do those factor in? And I think that has a lot of that intersection, and I think it's really interesting to read about.
Yeah, I agree. Which is good because we wrote it, so it'd be awful if it were boring. Cecilo?
I like the idea that time connects everything. Like talk about the past, present, future, and how this connection by time shapes the way we think, feel, and maybe the way we act as well. And I think when we talk about the psychology of time, it also links like different fields from evolution, especially. And also we talk about how culture change, how culture evolve, and I think it also shows that societies or groups or even individuals, they grow through the stage and histories. And then one aspect that I think we also discussed in this chapter is about how collective action is influenced by the way, by this psychology of time, because there are so many research that talk about collective action and look at how personal and collective experiences, which refer to the events from the past, influence engagement in collective action. But also, we also need to think about like collective imagination, what kind of future that we think will happen. And this collective imagination, or maybe in some research, they call it as utopia or dystopian thinking. This also influence engagement in collective action that lead into social change. So I think there's 2 points that most interesting to me in this chapter.
Yeah. Thank you.